Hi, this is Cheryl McQueen, designer with Bello's Designs. My video tutorial today is a fairly easy tutorial featuring a scene with a big moon and lots of atmosphere. I have used golden tones on this particular card, but it would be fun in spring green colors as well. So let's take a look at the supplies that I'll be using today. We will start out with a Lavinia Multifarious Smooth and Supreme cardstock. This has been cut to 6.5 inches by 4.5 inches. We will then use a piece of plain cardstock cut to 6 3/4 inches by 4 3/4 inches for the frame. Our card base is just a piece of color cardstock that I have cut to 10 inches by 7 inches and then folded that in half. For the stamps today, we're going to use the Lavinia Tree of Hope. This one is number LAV 658, and we will use both the tree and the mini branch that comes with it. We will also be using the Lavinia one called Mini Branch, and this one is LAV 511. And then we will use the Lavinia Birds, which is LAV 097. For our color inks today, I'm going to be using the Distress inks. I'll be using dried Marigold, Hickory Smoke, Carved Pumpkin, Black Soot, Fired Brick, Candied Apple, and Rusty Hinge. For our stamping ink, I'm going to be using the VersaFine Clair Nocturne. We'll also be using the Lavinia masking sheets today in our project. And if you've not ever used the Lavinia masking sheets, I love these. These are great to use. We'll also be using blending brushes and little daubers as well. I'm also going to go ahead and be using a stamping platform. I like to use the platform with a sticky grid on it so that I don't have to use magnets. Also, we will be using some paint brushes, and I just have a couple of different sizes here. And we will use a misting water bottle. I just have this little light mister that I like to use. I'm also going to be using a very large circle mask. This one is, I'm going to say this one is a good 2.5 to 3 inches. This one I actually created myself because I wanted to get a very great big moon on this particular project. We'll also be creating hills, and I'm going to be using the Lavinia masking sheets to do that, and then I will show you. I'm just going to tear my hills to create the look that I want for this particular card. To put our card together, we will be using just the adhesive tape. And then for some of the fine little details, I've got a fine tip black pen that I will be using as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get started working on our project. Okay, so to start out our project today, we're going to go ahead and take our piece of art card. And let me move a few things out of the way here. We're going to take our art card, and we're going to start out by placing our moon mask. So I've got this great big circle, and I'm going to place that at this top part of the card. And I like to use a little piece of tape. You can use the Lavinia masking, the Sweet Poppy low-tack masking tape. That works really great so it doesn't stick and tear up your card. And this is also a low-tack painter's tape. So either one of those will work for the purpose of just getting your mask down so that it doesn't wiggle while you're working on it. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of the Lavinia masking paper. So this is what I did, is I took a piece of the masking paper and I took the backing off. And so while the piece was still together, I just started tearing it, just kind of like you do with paper. so that I could have a top half and a lower half. So if you just took a piece of paper and started tearing it to create kind of a mountainous look, this is basically the same concept of what you're going to be doing with the masking paper. This one is a little bit hillier than what I did with the masking sheets. I like it to be just a subtle hill, but that's what you will be using for creating the hill look. So I'm now going to take that bottom half that I created when I did the tearing, and I'm going to lay that down onto my cardstock somewhere around in here. Somewhere around the bottom third of the card is what you're going to want to do. So we'll just lay that on there and stick it down. Okay, so now once we've started that, we're going to be ready to go ahead and start creating our sky look. Now what I want to do, let me look at the example here, is I want it to be a little bit lighter at the horizon and then gradually get to the dark part, just like it would be at nighttime, just after the sun has set. So to do that, we will start out with the dried marigold. So I'm going to take a blender and just take some dried marigold, and just down here at the top edge of where that mask is, I'm just going to blend in a little bit of that marigold. Okay, then once I have some of the dried marigold down, I am going to take the hickory smoke and let's see, let me get the right brush for the hickory smoke as well. And we're just going to do that gradually blending up towards the sky. We don't need a great big huge area of the hickory smoke, but we want it to overlap a little bit with the dried marigold. And we're starting to create some of that atmosphere of the lighter down close to the horizon, and then the gradual darkening as we get to the night sky. So I'm letting it overlap with the dried marigold. So that just creates some of that nice blend and misty kind of look as it gradually gets darker. All right, so it's a little bit harder to see with these lighter, a little bit lighter colors, but hopefully you can get the idea of what I'm doing here. And then we're going to move on, and we're actually going to do black soot. And that might sound like it will be just a little too dark, but it actually does such a really nice look. So now just start blending your black soot. And you can even do it a little lighter as you're closer to the hickory smoke, and then get darker at the very top. Okay, so as you can see there, I got it pretty dark at the top part of our card. So now what we're going to want to do is create some stars. So this is where we're going to take our spray bottle, and we're going to grab a little piece of paper towel. So I've got some here that I'll just tear off. And I'm just going to do a light kind of a spritz just to get that starry look on there. We'll let it set for just a second so that it can kind of remove some of the ink when we start dabbing it up. And so as you see, that just gives us that little bit of the star look. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and remove our lower mask. And as you can see, we've got this very nice little hill look. Now for this bottom part, we're going to want to go ahead and cover up the top part of our card. So I'm just going to take this mask and line it up with where it matched for the lower half. Get it as close as I can. And then I'm going to actually take like an extra piece, I just cut like an extra little piece of the masking sheet out so that I can lay it across the top, because this next part that I want to do, I don't want to make sure that it's not going to get anywhere onto the top part of the card. Now with this one, I've actually used this mask before, so it's not quite as sticky. So what I can even do if I want to make sure that my mask doesn't pop up some, is I can even put just a little bit of the tape underneath. When you use it the first time, it will stick much better. But because I use this and I have a little bit of moisture with it, it doesn't stick quite as well the second time. But instead of wasting too much of our masking paper, we can go ahead and just doctor it up for using it this second time. All right, so there, now we've got our mask down, and we can start working on doing the lower portion of our card. So what we're going to do for this part is use what I call the smooshing technique, so that we can get some interesting look to the very bottom part of our card here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually scoot this over just a little bit so that you can see the white surface that I'm going to work on. And what we're going to do is we're going to take some of our ink. So I'm going to take Rusty Hinge and the carved pumpkin and the fired brick. So we'll set those over there, carved pumpkin. And what we're going to do with these is we're going to take them and create just a little smoosh of ink there. And then we're going to take our water and spritz that. And then I'm going to pick up my card, and the reason that I've covered everything up is because I only want my smooshing technique to show up down here on my lower half. So I'm going to take this and I'm just going to dab it and kind of smoosh it around to create a kind of an interesting look with our inks. Now if you want to kind of speed the process up just a little bit, you can take your dryer. Let me grab mine real here quick. This is my heat tool. Just kind of dry it really quickly. That kind of speeds the process up just a little bit. Let's see if I can't get some of that smooshed up here in the top part a little bit. Alright, so that just kind of creates a little bit of a kind of interesting little texture down there on the bottom. So let's move on now and do some carved pumpkin. Same process, just lay down a little bit of ink there. Spritz it with your water. And then take your card and just smoosh it around, getting just a little bit of that color. And then we're going to take some fired brick and do the exact same thing. Grab a little bit more paper. I like to go ahead and sometimes just wipe up my surface. If you want your colors to blend a little bit, you can keep your surface the same. Sometimes I just think if you layer them on top of each other, you get a little bit more of a muddy effect. All right, so this is our fired brick. Spritz that. And now see what we can get with some of that fired brick. That's going to add a little bit of some reds to our colors there. And then maybe I'll get just a little bit more down here on the lower corner with the fired brick. All right, so that just kind of creates a really cool looking texture. So now what I'm going to want to do is go ahead and take one of my blending tools, and I'm going to take a little bit of the rusty hinge and just gently rub over across the surface of the landscape area. To me, what this does is it brings the colors together, because you're taking the same tone and blending it across the entire surface. So it takes all those colors that are just different splotches, if you want to call them that, and makes them look like they actually blend together, even though you can still see the distinctness of those splotches. And this just gives you a really cool looking basic landscape coloring. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and create just a little bit more mood by taking the black soot and a dauber, and we're just going to kind of drag down some of the black soot color from the top of the hill. Maybe pull some down a little bit into the surface, to the lower part of it, just on the sides a little bit, and maybe here in the center, just to kind of accentuate that dip. Bring some down over on this side. And what this does is, again, just gives a little bit more of the moodiness, and kind of mirrors the black soot that we used at the top in the sky portion. All right, so now we have got a cool looking landscape part at the bottom. So we can go ahead and remove our masks. And with the smooshing technique, you might get a little bit of the bleeding, but I actually think that that adds to the background and looks like there are trees even farther in the distance than the ones that we're actually going to create here. All right, so now let's go ahead and remove our moon mask and go ahead and give the moon just a little bit of texture and cool look. Okay, so I'm going to remove the moon mask. And so now we've got that nice big white moon, but that's not how the moon really looks. It's got some texture to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our carved pumpkin and our hickory smoke, and we're going to go ahead and just put in a little bit of texture onto the moon, kind of like I've done here with this one. And what I'd like to do with this one is just go ahead and use a large brush. I'm going to take a little bit of water, just spritz it on the surface of my work mat. And then I'm going to take some of the carved pumpkin first. Just put that down there. I'm going to wet my brush and dip it into the carved pumpkin. And then I'm just basically going to kind of create some spots, I guess you would say. You know how when you look up at the moon you see those different variations of colors. So that's kind of what we're trying to attempt to do here, is just put in some moon-like textures. And you really can't do this wrong. However you put it on there is going to work. Do some around close to the edge as well. And just add a little bit of color. Alright, and then we'll move on and get our hickory smoke and do the exact same thing. So I'll take my hickory smoke and put a little bit of that down on the ink. I'm going to wipe off my brush just a little bit. Dip it in the water and pick up some of that hickory smoke. And do the same thing by adding just a little bit of kind of random spots. To create that moon texture. Okay, so I don't know if you can see how we've just created just a little bit of a moon effect there. Alright, so now at this point we are ready to go ahead and do our stamping. Let me clean up this thing real quick so I don't lay something down in it. So we're going to go ahead and grab our stamping platform. Let me move some of these inks out of the way and grab my VersaFine Claret Nocturne. Alright, so we will put our card down onto the stamping platform. The reason I love using a stamping platform is that if I don't quite get the impression that I like the first time around, then I can always just re-ink and re-stamp. So we'll go ahead and start out with our Tree of Hope. And I'm just going to have that go over to the side, across the side of the moon, here over on the right-hand side. Okay, now let's go ahead and take our small little branches. So I've got the branch and then the little piece that came with the tree of hope that has some little branches. And we're just going to layer them up here close to the top of the hills so that it looks like we've got trees in the distance. Okay, so now that we've got our trees in there, we need to go ahead and ground them just a little bit. So this is where I'm going to go ahead and take my fine tip pen. And I'm just going to draw a little bit of grounding and some grass around the base of these trees. And then I will also add a little bit around this tree and then just a few little grass sprigs around the landscape area. This just gives us a little bit more of a grounding effect and makes it look like the trees and things aren't just floating around. Alright, and then as you notice there, I went ahead and just added a few extra branches just to fill it in just a little bit and then make it so that our trees didn't all look exactly the same. Okay, so now we are at a point that we would like to go ahead and fill in our tree. We want the tree to have a little bit of color. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to take my rusty hinge and a fine tip brush. And then I'm just going to go ahead and kind of paint in with the rusty hinge. I chose rusty hinge because it's basically a color that we've used before, so it sticks with our color theme. So I'll take the rusty hinge. We'll get just a little bit of water down here for dipping, and then I'm just basically going to go across the surface of it and paint in and fill in the tree. Okay, and at this point, if you want to, you can also fill in and give it just a little bit of shading. Again, you can choose another ink, or if you would think it's easier for you to just use a art marker, that's fine too. So let's go ahead and just add just a little bit in here just to give it a little bit of an interest and a little bit of shades. I'm just going to draw just a few little spots with some of the darker of this art marker. That just gives it a little bit more dimension, makes it a little bit less flat. So just a little bit of shading there. Right, so now that we've got that done, we do want to go ahead and put just a little bit of color in our trees that are in the background, and you can decide how detailed you want it. What I wanted it to do was have just more of a watercolor look to the trees, just kind of a misty, faded kind of look. So I'll take the carved pumpkin, put a little bit of that down, and then go back to my larger brush, dip it over here in some of the water, and then just add just the look, kind of a watercolor splash there in the trees. I don't know how well you can see that. And the reason I like this brush is it's a little bit wispy, so it kind of gives a really interesting kind of wispy look to the little dabbing that I'm doing with the color. Now, again, to give it just a little bit of a variation, I'll go ahead and go back to the rusty hinge and just add a few little dashes of that different color in there. And with this, I might even just kind of do little dashes on dots on it to give it a little bit more of a leaf effect. So instead of actually painting, we just kind of do a little dabbing. Again, this just gives a couple of shades and still makes it look like it's in the distance with kind of a little bit of a misty look to it. All right, so now to me, with the tree in front of the moon, I want to go ahead and go back and take my dauber that I used to put this black in, and take my black soot, and we may not even need to use extra on it. We might just be able to use the ink that's on here, but I'll have it on hand in case I want it. Just put a little bit darker kind of effect where the tree is. And I think I might go ahead and just dab just a little bit, just to give it a little bit darker. Even though it's not really casting a shadow, if you want to call that, on the moon, it still just gives it a little bit of a different kind of denseness, I guess, if you want to call it that, right there where the tree is. It just adds a little more interest to the moon. All right, so now we've kind of got the look that we're wanting here. We do want to go ahead and put our birds in at the top. So let me grab the bird stamp, and we'll just kind of have them going across the moon there. Again, we'll take our Nocturne, ink up the birds, and there we go. Now, if you like, you can always put a sentiment down here in the lower part. Let me go ahead and pull this off of our stamping platform. I kind of like this look without the sentiment, but you've got a nice good space down here that you could just not put a little bit of grass up there and put a sentiment instead. Now, I think I want to go ahead and give just a little bit more atmosphere right there around the base of the tree. So I'm going to go ahead and use a little bit of the candied apple just to add a little bit more touch of color. So I'm just going to add just a little bit of that candied apple around the base of the tree here. Just to give it just a little bit of a more of a pop and almost a shadow effect. And if you wanted to, you could even get most of the paint out and do a little bit lighter down as you get away from the base of the tree. And that gives a little bit of a interest as well. All right, so now we are ready to put our card together. One thing I would like to do before we go ahead and put our card together is I usually like to have a little bit of almost like a little frame, a distressed looking frame. And the way I do that is just take my dauber and the black soot. And just kind of go in little circles and just create a little bit of a border or frame around the edge. This just kind of, to me, gives it a finished look, draws the eye towards the center. You're not going to be able to see it quite as much when you get up to the black part of our card this particular time, but it just gives it a little more of a distressed and interesting look to me. So we're just going to go around the edges. And it just gives that little sooty kind of look. A little distressed. Alright, so I don't know how well you can see that. When I take the picture and post it at the end, you'll be able to see it probably a lot better. Alright, and so at this point we can go ahead and put our card together, and we will take our, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and wipe down my surface real quick, because I always worry that any ink that's gotten on the surface when I lay my card upside down, then it might get on there and put ink in places I don't want it to be. So we'll just wipe this up real quickly. And then we'll take our card, and I like to use the adhesive tape, but you can use a glue that's made for paper as well. But this just, to me, goes very fast. So put my tape on. Get our frame. Line that up. So that we've got a really nice frame to our art piece. And then we will take our card and do the exact same thing on our cardstock base. And there's our card. Thank you so much for watching my video tutorial today. This card has such a wonderful nudie look, and you could create a totally different look just by using different colors. Try using dark blues or greens and see what results you get. I hope that you give it a try, and please remember to check out the tutorials on the design team page at delbellosdesigns.com. Have a great day.